Hello, I've been reading this book here, memoir or an autobiography by Andrea Leadsom, who was the person who stood against Theresa May in the leadership election which saw Theresa May elected. Now, you remember that happened mostly because Andrea Leadsom bowed out suddenly. Andrea Leadsom had had an interview with the Times, and in this interview, she had said that, Theresa May had a disadvantage because she was not a mother. And this seemed such a foolish thing to have said. Well, the full details of the conversation with Rachel Sylvester are here in this memoir, and it is so fascinating. And of course, many of the other players in this story are people that I've come across I know well. And the key to the silly interview is so clearly stated. Andrea Leadsom went to that interview ill-prepared, on her own, without any means of taking a copy of the interview, of having somebody sitting next to her to say, I don't think that's an appropriate question, and so on. She was completely exposed to the full tyranny of our media. This is why it's so important to have a good online security system. This is why it's important to have a law which is going to protect people from the tyranny of our media. This is why Nadine Dorries made such a mess of her ministry. And I am speaking as somebody who's had a similar experience in a way. I did a number of interviews for a Russian TV show, and I was increasingly concerned that I was being misrepresented. So I did what Andrea Leadsom should have done there. I asked if I could take a copy on my phone of the interview as it was being recorded. And then I was able to place my copy against the interview that was broadcast, and I was horrified that words had been dubbed into my mouth. Now, Andrea Leadsom points out that she asked for a full copy of the text of the interview, a full transcript, and that was never offered by the Times. Instead, they released bits and pieces which backed up their particular interpretation. Sort of naive and silly. And Andrea Leadsom, for the first time, comes across as vulnerable and I think deeply likeable. I begin to wonder if I've done her a misservice. I came across Andrea Leadsom for the first time because she was my MP and because I was particularly concerned about the way this government and the previous Labour government had ratcheted up the visa system so that it was extremely unfair to students, to foreign students who are coming to study in our country. It remains extremely unfair, and it's been particularly dogged by the development of what Mrs. May, Theresa May, called the hostile environment. But I think it's been dogged by something else, and that's by a certain laziness among the civil servants who run the Foreign Office, and a defiance. There is such a backlog of paperwork in the Home Office, and it is partly an ideological backlog, and that needs to stop. And Andrea Leadsom wouldn't actually let me get a word in edgeways. Literally, she ploughed straight through me. and talked and talked and talked. And I found this offensive and rude. And I've never really forgotten it. She then passed me on to Theresa May. And I felt that this was wrong, that a constituent who comes to an MP has a right to be listened to, not to be hectored. And similarly, a constituent who is in a position to talk to the Secretary of State has a right to be listened to, not to be hectored. We don't need to be told what government policy is, we can read it. Government ministers and MPs need to listen to what constituents have to say. And in that spirit, of course, I have just written to the new Secretary of State for Digital Culture, Media and Sport, and I will let you know more about that in the next few days.